So this is big. It's a lethal blow to Hamas if confirmed. Yahya Sinwar was the head of the military wing of Hamas, but he commanded a high level of authority, a sort of charismatic influence and power over the entirety of Hamas, and especially over Gaza. He came to his leadership position following the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, um, and has been significant, of course, in terms of the course of negotiations for a ceasefire, which haven't really gained any momentum over the past few weeks. In fact, we have not heard of any progress having been made with respect to a ceasefire agreement and the release of Israeli hostages still in captivity after more than a year.
And as is often the way in long-standing conflict, particularly when it reaches the awful heights we've seen here, or lows, I suppose, that we've seen here in the last year, and one individual, for one reason or another, becomes emblematic of it. And he is that man, isn't he?
He is absolutely. He was seen as an extreme hardliner, but a sort of a voice for the Gazans and the wider Palestinians aligned with Hamas. He was seen as fierce, sort of a cult of personality around him. So his death will be a huge source of anxiety, of uncertainty for Hamas, the rank and file fighters, for other commanders, and for their supporters. When a leader of this caliber in an armed movement is killed, eliminated, this creates a moment of a reckoning. It's demoralizing for the organization. There will be those that argue that Hamas will now become more emboldened to fight back, to punish Israel for the killing of their leader. But the reality is that we're not dealing with the same Hamas that existed on the 7th of October.
You said you believe it to be a lethal blow. By lethal, do you mean end of Hamas?
Well, they are now a headless body. They've lost their coordination. Their military capacity has been severely degraded by the Israel military campaign that has been going on for a year now, just over a year now. It's too soon, I'm sure, to say that this is the end of Hamas, but it is certainly not the Hamas that existed before the 7th of October. And with Yahya Sinwar eliminated potentially, it will be a very different Hamas going forward. There will be others who will fill in this void. There have been other Israeli assassinations of senior Palestinian commanders in the past, and these ranks are filled. But I would argue Yahya Sinwar was unique in that he commanded a certain level of authority and projected power to an extent that I don't imagine others in Hamas being able to do in the same way.
Similar to Nasrallah in Hezbollah?
I would say so, if not at the same level. Nasrallah was incredibly charismatic. He had been in his role for decades, and he had a regional sort of audience. Yahya Sinwar was more limited in his scope, but for the Gazans especially, he was a man of significant authority and influence.
If the blessing of this could be the end of it all, and by that I mean the ongoing war, that would be something. We heard reports that when the assassination inside Iran happened of that leading Hamas figure, that Sinwar himself gave orders to those holding the hostages to be much harder on them. That when, if any, and there was a rescue, wasn't there? In any attempted rescue, the message from Sinwar was kill the hostages rather than have them rescued. Who knows what? I mean, the hostages' fate. It's hard to know whether this is an exit point for them, or as in getting home, or just the worst thing possible, which is that they just become angrier still towards the hostages and kill them.
Exactly. And much of what happens next hinges on the fate of the Israeli hostages. There was a scenario that was drawn up by the representation was that Yahya Sinwar was hiding deep underground in the tunnel network surrounded by the hostages. And of course, that wasn't it doesn't look as though that was how he was eliminated. So what happens next with the hostages, I think, will be key in determining the course of the conflict going forward. If the Israeli hostages are returned somehow safely to their homes, to their families, this could be the off ramp that Israel needs to end the military campaign in Gaza, to talk about what comes next in terms of a peaceful political settlement. But we still know so little at this stage, as you said. Death is yet unconfirmed. But the fear is that there could be a hardening of the stance toward the Israeli hostages, as we saw after Haniyeh was killed. So a high level of uncertainty, but much will depend in terms of determining Israel's next steps on what happens to the Israeli hostages, whether intelligence is able to identify where they are right now, and whether access can be obtained safely.
We know that Iran and what's going on in Lebanon is a big front for, in this conflict at the moment. Do you think if he is dead, is this a point where countries like Qatar, perhaps especially Qatar, will step forward and say to Hamas on the ground in Gaza, it's over. It's over. This bit of it is over. Is that conceivable?
There will certainly be mounting pressure upon Hamas to make some concessions now that they would not have considered viable or possible before the news of Sinwar's death. This changes the calculus. This is important. This is one of those turning points in the course of the conflict. And so we shouldn't underestimate or trivialize the significance of this. Again, there will be a faction in Hamas that will argue that the fight must continue, that the Palestinian cause is bigger than just one man. But Yahya Sinwar was significant, and it will not be easy to replace him. This is a moment where the group will be demoralized and their military operational capabilities diminished. And so a lot remains to be seen, but this is an important turning point. The hope, if we can even speak of that, is that this will provide Israel with the narrative of triumph, of victory, this off-ramp for it to begin to conclude its military campaign in Gaza, which will mean easing of the suffering of the Palestinians.
As much as
Yeah,
as much as the
exactly, and
hostages.
allowing more humanitarian aid to come in, and the freeing, of course, of the Israeli hostages.
And the reports, and again, nothing is confirmed yet. The reports are that I see that Israel's Channel 12 is reporting sources that they have confirming all DNA tests are confirming that Sinwar is dead, but that isn't yet official confirmation by the IDF or the Israeli government. But the reports around his potential killing suggest that the airstrike was on a school that was being used as a shelter for people. And we've seen this pattern of airstrikes, haven't we, where afterwards we're told they're attacking schools. Israel's response is often, well, I'm sorry, but Hamas are in schools and their weaponry is in schools. The irony, if this is what this scenario is, that Hamas's leader has been killed having a meeting in a school. I mean, you'd need confirmation of that, but it's in a sense, it encapsulates the whole war, doesn't it? Or the whole military operation.
It does. And we don't yet know the circumstances around his death. There are various competing scenarios. One is that there was a shootout. There were 3 militants that were identified by IDF soldiers during a routine patrol. And in the course of that shootout, 3 Hamas fighters were killed. And this happened in a neighborhood in southern Gaza City. So this is one scenario that's been circulating thus far in the news and social media. But we don't know yet what the circumstances are. This would raise questions as to why Yahya Sinwar was out and not in the tunnel. Had he exited for provisions or for any other reason, for a type of meeting? But you're right in terms of the pattern of behavior of Hamas as an organization, of holding these kind of high-level meetings in civilian areas, residences, houses, schools, clinics. We've seen this time and time and again. The close entanglement between military and civilian structures within Gaza.